Hi, welcome back to another episode of Dear Single Mama Podcast. I am your host and founder, Clarion, and I'm so excited about this episode. I'm always excited about all my episodes. I mean, I say that all of the time, but I have a special guest here with me, a friend, a sister in Christ, and so I'm super excited. We're just about to have like a whole conversation, and this one, we're going to get real. We experienced some of the same things. We went through a similar situation actually. And so we're just going to have a conversation. So before we continue, if you are not subscribed, make sure you hit that subscribe button and that notification bell, and make sure you follow this podcast. And I'm about to pray, and then we're just going to dive right in. I'm going to introduce my guest, my friend, and then we're just going to dive right in, okay? All right. So, Lord God, we thank you for this opportunity. God, we thank you for who these episodes and who this podcast is going to touch. God, we just plead the blood of Jesus over us, over those who are listening. God, may we completely decrease and may you increase, and just allow your presence to touch us and be with us no matter where we are. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So Carla, she is a licensed professional counselor. Okay, she is a business owner, single mother, and a woman of God, most importantly. She was raised in Cobb County, Georgia, but she currently resides in Alabama. She received her bachelor's in psychology from Tuskegee, the illustrious Tuskegee University, and her master's from the University of. That's how I'm going to say it. I don't know if that's how you say it, but that's how it's going to get said today. And a year ago, Carla, she opened up her own private practice in counseling to help support those for mental health needs in her community. She enjoys traveling, helping others, and spending time with her family and decorating. Did I say she's a single mother? Okay. You guys help me give a virtual welcome to Carla. Hey, how are you?
Doing good. How are you?
I am doing good. I'm excited about this episode. We talked about this about a month or so. Has it been longer than a month? We talked about
It's
it.
been a while.
And so I'm just excited to just kind of be here with you, just to kind of give you guys the background. So we both were married. Let me say, I was married for just about a year when I got divorced. So we both experienced divorces at a very early rate within our marriages, and we both experienced marriage with narcissists. And so we're just going to dive right in and just talk about how we ended up in those positions relationally. So Carla, if you just want to start off, like, what was your experience like? And just take it back to childhood, because we didn't get married to get a divorce, and then it hit us and we realized, oh, we had a whole lot of work to do, and it just didn't start with our marriages.
Right, most definitely. The thing for me, something that I started to realize, like not even a year ago, late last year, was it got to that point because of the beliefs that I had about myself. A fairy tale that I had created in my mind, starting in childhood, because of the things that I had experienced, and I didn't really understand like the depth of things until I was in counseling and things like that. So just starting back to my childhood, I have memories like as young as a baby, but I can really like remember stuff at 4 years old. And at the time, before we moved to Cobb County, we lived in like Columbus, Georgia. And we was real close with my mom's mom, my grandma. She was primarily like taking care of me and my older sister at the time. My dad was still in the military, and my mom, she was working and stuff, and she was there too. But we were just spending a lot of time with my grandma. Loved going to church. Our grandma took us to church every single weekend. And I always felt like very connected at church. But of course, at 4, you don't really understand. I just like
Right.
getting dressed up and going, reading the Bible, singing the songs, all the things.
Mm-hmm.
So when we moved to Cobb County, Georgia, I was, 5, about to be 6, in pre-K still, but still about to start kindergarten. And so at that time, that's when I was spending a lot more time with my parents, like every day. So just getting to know them more and spending more time with them, Being that young, we was just having fun. Like we would go skating every weekend. Me and my dad, we would watch movies together.
Yeah.
We lived in an apartment complex, so we had a lot of friends. Just meeting new people, that was different because we really didn't have a lot of friends,
Mhm.
in Columbus. But we was just having a good childhood at that
Mhm.
age. Um, I started to notice like more tension with my parents, but I really didn't like understand what was going on. Like sometimes we would hear them like fussing with each other, but we would be told like just stay in your room, all this different stuff like that or whatever.
Mhm.
So that's what we did. But as far as I was concerned, my childhood was pretty perfect up until maybe like around 8 or something like that. But prior to that, just having a good time. Me and my sister were close, begging my mom to have
Yeah.
another baby, and she
Yeah.
did. So I'm a big sister, at 6, and we're just having a good time. Um,
Mhm.
so at that time, I would say like the biggest trauma that I dealt with was like my eating habits. I was very picky.
Mhm.
I'm a vegan now, but at that age, I was like, I want to be a vegetarian. Like, I don't want to eat meat.
Mhm.
I was like 7 years old, like saying like, I don't want to eat meat. Black parents, they like, you gonna eat whatever I give you.
Right.
So most of the times I would have to at the dinner table. I couldn't leave the table until I finished eating.
Mhm.
Just different stuff like that. And looking back on it, I guess that was a little traumatic, but at the time
Mhm.
it was just like, okay, whatever. Like I'm not gonna eat. Y'all can go to bed. I'm just being left at the table. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Um, I would definitely say I was like a smarter than usual child. Like sometimes I would know things and I wouldn't know like how or why I knew things. I just knew stuff.
Mhm.
Um, at that age, I wanted to learn how to read all the words in the dictionary. We had the little encyclopedia set. I wanted to
Mhm.
uh, know all the information in there. So I was a little tomboyish. I used to go play in the creek, all this
Mhm.
different stuff like that. I was very outspoken at that time. So I can remember me and my mom had just talked about this like a few weeks ago. Me and my mom had kind of got into it because they would always be like, don't go play in the creek. I would
Mhm.
go play in the creek anyway, but most
Yeah.
times I would fall in there so my clothes would get wet and I would have to try to, change them and stuff like that. But I can remember one time me and my mom had got into it and she was just like, okay, well, pack your stuff if you don't want to listen. So she's packing my stuff in the suitcase, and my older sister's just crying, like, don't put her out, don't put her out. I said, I don't care. Like, I'm gonna call CPS. I'm
Mhm.
5. Like, what do I know about CPS?
Yeah.
So it would just be like little stuff like that. But like I say, everything was pretty much okay prior to that. Things started getting well, I will say before that. Maybe a couple years ago, I started realizing, like, when I look back on my childhood, like, I was very anxious as a child. And I
Mm.
didn't know, like, at the time, of course. I would always have, like, a hard time sleeping. Um, Me and my older sister had shared a room, and I would always be like, how she sleep so good? And, like, I can't go to sleep. Like, I would
Yeah.
just be very anxious. Time I kind of didn't, like, know why. Sometimes my mom would have people like babysitters, like if her and my dad were working time or whatever, or going out. We have to get babysat. And I can remember one time this older lady was babysitting us, and I hated
Mhm.
going to her house. And I would never go to sleep. I would just sit there. I would sit on her porch and like literally wait on my mom. Like I can remember having thoughts like, are they coming back to get us? Like
Yeah.
what's going on? Like I can remember like feeling anxious, but not really knowing that I was anxious. And that's
Mm.
pretty much played a thing my whole life. So, like during maybe the Christmas time or something like that, we had went to visit our grandma, and when we had came back, they had bought a house, so we had moved into a house. I
Mhm.
would say like at this point, that's when um, I would just say everything in my life just spiraled down. Um,
Mhm.
we weren't really going skating as a family anymore. Like we weren't doing those little family outings and different things. Like at that point, we would just go like on family vacations. Um, we had went on like a cruise or two during that time, so that was about as much as I would just say bonding one-on-one time that we were spending.
Yeah.
Um, so it was just kind of like things were going down. Like we didn't have all the friends that we used to have at the apartment complex. Like, you can go outside and there's a lot of kids, we
Mhm.
live in a neighborhood now, so it wasn't that type of interaction. So we started spending more time like with each other, my older sister and my baby sister at the time.
Mhm.
We were just spending a lot more time just with each other. Um, so our parents were working more, or they would be like in their room, like they really just weren't interacting with us, like they used to.
Mhm.
So my parents will always argue, but around this time, it started getting more physical. Sometimes they would both be the aggressor. Like sometimes my dad would start fights, and sometimes, my mom would just be fussing at him, and we would be like, "Please be quiet," because he would only sit down for only so long, or just take the yelling and stuff before,
Yeah.
he wanted to get physical. So that started a real fear in me. Like whenever I hear people yelling or getting loud, like I just assume a fight is gonna happen.
Mhm.
So I always have this thing like, don't yell. Like even my voice, I have to like teach myself to use my voice louder because it's just like, we don't yell. Um so during that time, like I say, the physical fights just they weren't frequent, but they were frequent enough to where, you would be waiting on the next time. So like I said earlier, I was a little smarter than most kids at that time. So I loved going to school. Like that was my little safe haven. I didn't have to worry about certain things. Like I started having like a little fears at that point, like what if one of them kill each other? Like, what if the other one goes to
Yeah.
jail? Just start thinking like, what's gonna happen if it ever gets to that point?
Mhm.
So at this time, I'm like in second, third grade, like concerned about my well being and stuff like that. So school was just really like a safe space. You getting praised because you're smarter than usual. Um, different things like that. I really didn't start getting in trouble in school until like third grade. I would always talk. I was very talkative.
Mhm.
People who know me now probably would not believe that.
Yeah.
So I was very talkative, and I was always getting in trouble. Like the teacher, she would always be like, you're just too smart to be talking. Like you shouldn't be talking to certain people anyway. And it's just like they talking to me, we having a good time. Like, what's
Right.
the
What's the
issue? Like we doing
problem?
our work,
Yeah.
but every time the report cards came around, I was, getting in trouble for talking or the progress reports or whatever. So I had started getting whoopings for that. So me being the middle child, so my older sister, she had a different dad. Me and my baby sister at that time, we had the same mom and dad, but she had a different dad. But my
Mhm.
dad was primarily raising her, like he had been in her life since she was like two. Well, like one
Yeah.
or two or whatever. So, um, so it was like at that time I was the only child getting in trouble. Like, of course, the baby not getting in trouble. My older sister wasn't getting in trouble. My mom, she wasn't a disciplinarian. Like, she did not. She believed in like she say talking to children. So she was never going to whoop us or yell at us or just do anything like that.
Yeah.
So my dad was just the only one like really getting on to me. And so I would always wonder like, why I'm the only one getting in trouble? Like my older sister be doing
Mhm.
stuff she need to be getting in trouble too, but
Yeah.
it just always seemed like I was the only one singled out, at that time. I was real bad about talking back at that time. Like I felt like, my dad, he would say stuff and I'm like, well, I have thoughts too. I have opinions too. And I would just say them. He
Yeah.
would always yell at me like, you just need to be quiet and, shut up and, just listen. You don't always have to say something back.
Mhm.
So, enough of going through that cycle, I just started internalizing stuff. Like um, everything I wanted to say, I just started saying like in my head. So
Mm.
that was enough for me. Like, okay, I'm still saying what I'm saying. You don't know it, but I'm saying what I have to say.
Right.
So I just started like internalizing things. And at that point, that's when I started just getting more quiet. Like I literally just stopped talking. Went from like, I would say this bubbly, outgoing child to, just very quiet. And like I say, just even having the anxiety and fears about, their physical altercations and things like that. I just got quiet. So I can remember this one time, they had started fighting like really bad. And sometimes
Mhm.
like our baby sister, like she would be downstairs, so we would have to like go and get her, to make sure that she was safe. So this one time I was just like really scared. I was like, what am I gonna do? Um, and so I decided to call 911 that time.
Mhm.
And never did that before, but I was just like, I'm calling the police. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and wait.
Yeah.
So maybe like a little while after that, the police shows up and, everything stops. They talk to him, everything like that. So when it was time to go to bed, my mom had came to talk to me and she just basically asked me like, did you call 911? And she wasn't mean about it. But in so many words, she basically told me like, don't ever do that again. Basically like the way that I took it is just you just deal with these things, keep it to yourself, and you don't tell nobody.
Mm. That
So that was
what stays in the house, what goes on in the house stays in the house, same.
right, right. So that was like my first real indicator um, to just like suffer in silence. And
Mm.
that was literally the running thing up until now in my
Mhm.
life. Just you go through things, you don't let nobody know, and you just let it be like what it is. So like I say, from that point on, I really just started becoming more quiet and, just fearful of everything. Just, like it is what it is.
Mm.
So, my parents were working more, like I said. So around this time too, we were having to be more responsible. Like we were left at home by ourselves more.
Mhm.
My sister, she's real goofy and playful, so I was always like the more responsible one. Like I don't lie, people
Mhm.
always, yeah, people always assume like I was the older sister. It's like no, I'm not.
Yeah.
Um, and I will say I always felt older than what I was. I
Yeah.
remember
It's always the younger siblings.
Mhm, mhm. So I always felt older anyway, so it's just like, okay, like we're just being responsible, we're taking care of ourselves, all these different things like that. But that I feel like it really hindered me in my life because I've just always been like kind of motherly. Just
Mhm.
always taking charge and did things and it's just like when I'm supposed to be a child, like I can't be,
Yeah.
so, that was just that. So like I say, around that time, my parents, they weren't really like emotionally available. Like I was very sensitive as a child. Like they would say that
Mhm.
all the time. Like it don't take much for me to cry, things
Yeah.
like that. So, it was just like I was feeling a lot of things that was going on, but of course, like I didn't really know how to express it. So I can remember around this time I just started thinking about my future, like when I became a mom, when I
Mhm.
got married. So I started creating like I guess like a little fantasy in my head, like
Mm.
this is the type of mom I want to be. Just a wife. You just start thinking about all of that. So like I said, I'm a little crybaby. Like
No, no, it's fine. You're fine.
yeah, I know. Sometimes, like, my spirit is still like shedding this stuff.
Mhm.
So,
Take your time.
so I just really started thinking about the future and like my life was gonna be better, once I got older.
Mhm.
So that's kind of what I did at that age to kind of like get through things. Like I would just think
Mm.
about all the things I was gonna be and do when I became older. At that time I wanted to be a veterinarian, so I was like, I'm gonna have my little career and things like that. And everything's gonna be good.
Mhm.
So we went through that from like I was like 7 until like almost until 10. So on my 10th birthday, I remember that birthday because I think it was like the first birthday I had got a cake. So I got this little Winnie the Pooh cake,
Mhm.
and they sang happy birthday to me. Like I still remember the little outfit I wore and stuff like that. But
Mhm.
10 was significant for me because after turning 10, I felt like my life went downhill like even more. Like it got worse. So I was like, you know, at that time I'm like, how could it get like any worse than, than what it had been. So let me go grab some tissue real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, I can remember, like I say, turning 10 and, everything just kind of went downhill. So we had went to like my grandma's house for the Christmas time or something like that, like over Christmas break. And so when we came back from the Christmas break, like our mom had picked us up and she just basically had told us like her and my dad were getting a divorce and, they weren't going to be together. I was relieved at the time because I'm like, okay, well, we don't have to worry about y'all fighting no more. Like I
Yeah.
was happy in that sense, but at the same time, it's like your family's being broken up.
Yeah.
So when we went back home, like we didn't actually like go back to our house. Like we lived in a whole different house. So while we was gone, like my mom was moving. So it was just kind of like, okay. So it was like kind of a lot to accept at one time because it's just like,
Yeah.
what's going on? Like, where's my dad? Like, okay.
Yeah.
So we had moved, but I was supposed to like be out of the district for the school that I was at because the neighborhood that we had lived in, my school was literally like right across the street. Like I would walk to school. So we lived a little further away, so my mom had to start like driving me to school. And so we did that for like a while, and we didn't see our dad for like a while. Like we didn't see him for like some months. Like we just didn't see him, so we didn't know like what was going on. So every day, of course, going to school because it was like the middle of the school year, so my mom just didn't want to like have me go to like a new school all of a sudden. So she was still driving me, but every day, like, you see your old neighborhood, where you've lived the past few years and you just see the house and stuff and it's just like kind of a reminder of everything.
Yeah.
Um, so I definitely would say both of my parents had started like dating very quickly after they had separated. And now that we were in a single, parent household, like there was financial strains.
Yeah.
Sometimes we wouldn't have like lunch money on our account. And like I told you, I was just feeling very anxious, even about that. Like, what happens when I punch this little number in and I can't get no school lunch today, or have to get a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, So
Yeah.
I can definitely say like everything just made me anxious.
Mm.
Um, so like I said, we didn't see our dad for a while. And then one day he came over. Like he came to visit. We were all in the living room, like laughing, having a good time. Because it had been like well, of course, as a child, you don't know how long it had been, but it had been like a few months, since we had seen him. So when it was time for him to leave, like that was the first time we saw him like actually leave. Because before, we just came back and we moved,
He was gone.
So it was hard. Like everybody was crying and at that point, they were even having conversations about if they was just gonna kind of like work it out, because the divorce like wasn't finalized. But they was kind of having conversations about working it out, trying to be back together. We was begging them at that point, like just get back together and
Yeah.
be happy. Because even as a child at that age, like I couldn't understand like why I couldn't have a certain type of family. Like, why couldn't my parents be happy? Or, I just had like, and just asking myself like why I couldn't see certain things in my house that, I saw at my friend's house or something like that. So I was always like confused and stuff, but of course, you can't go to your parents with these questions or,
Yeah.
really get a real answer that's gonna, make you feel better.
Right.
Um, so during this time, we weren't because that's the thing too. When we moved up to Cobb County, away from our grandma, we weren't going to church anymore. So that was something else too that I had lost. Just not going to church anymore, all that stuff. So after they had got a divorce, I had asked my mom for a Kurt Franklin CD. And she got it for me, and I would literally like just play that song, like was play the whole album like every night going to bed, like until I woke up. Like that was my way of kind of, I guess, like coping
Mm-hmm.
with my parents not being together anymore, and just, you know, even everything that we had experienced, you know, while they were together and stuff like that. So like I say, my parents had started dating very quickly after their divorce, pretty much like within that same year. So it really wasn't a lot of time to like process, okay, your parents aren't together before you're having to meet new people.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just kind of strange, weird, you know, it's just like, okay. Um, so later on, like towards that year, one of the guys that my mom was dating, well, the guy that she ended up dating, because she had dated a couple, but I guess, you know, she found the one that she wanted. Um, you know, he had started babysitting us while she was at work. Because prior to that, we was just left at home, you know. The other parent was out of the home, so, you know, we were still like just being for ourselves.
Yeah.
So during one of the first visits, where he was watching us, he had actually started molesting me. And I
Mm-hmm.
was 10 years old. So like I say, turning 10 was just like the worst thing ever. You know, so the first time it happened, like I was very confused, because I just remember we were all sitting here, like me, him and my sisters. You know, we were sitting there watching American Idol, and I think like I fell asleep apparently. And typically me and my sisters, like we were sleeping in the other room, um, just all together in the
Mm-hmm.
bed or whatever. But I just remember like when I woke up, I felt something like grabbing my chest, and I was like, "What is that?" And when I woke up, like I was confused. I'm like, "Where am I?
Yeah.
Not in that room," you know. So I literally just laid there for a minute, like trying to figure out like what is going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually, like I figured out, like, oh, this is him, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just remember, like, he's like, mom, just hurry up and come. Like, I was trying to like turn over so like I could knock his hand off, but it was like not working. So I remember when she finally had came, and she was just like, you know, why she sleeping here? And he was just like, oh, she fell asleep. I just, you know, left her in here, whatever, like that. And so
Hmm.
that next morning when because you know we had to get up to go to school and stuff like that, and I just remember sitting in the back seat, and I felt like empty inside, like because I was
Mm-hmm.
confused, like I was just trying to process, like what happened. You know,
Yeah.
like a part of me like wanted to tell my mom, but I just started having thoughts like, what if, you know, what if she confronts him, and, you know, then I have to tell the police and somebody has to go to jail, or what if they don't believe me? You know, I just
Yeah.
having like all these thoughts of like, what's going to happen after you tell, you
Yeah.
know, and I started thinking about, you know, back when she was just like, you don't call the police. You don't tell nobody. You know, so I was
Mm-hmm.
like, well, I guess I don't tell nobody.
Yeah.
So she dealt with him for like 5 years, but like the molestation would be like gaps in between. Like there would
Mm.
be years in between before something else would happen. Or, you know, it would be like a long time in between. Um, so during that time, like I say, we had our own house, you know, wasn't staying with nobody. So um we had eventually started like visiting with our dad more. Like we actually started having like visitation. Like we were going every other weekend. So in the beginning, he was getting all three of us, my older sister, me, and you know, my baby sister.
Mm-hmm.
And he got us like a couple of times, and then all of a sudden one weekend, my older sister wasn't allowed to go. Like she couldn't go anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So up until that point, like my sisters were the only thing that I had, you know, like
Yeah.
that was the most consistent thing. So it's just like, why she can't come no more? Like, why do we have to be separated? Um, and I can remember that being difficult because it's like I didn't even want to go see my dad no more because I already knew like we were gonna have to leave my sister.
Yeah.
Um, so um, it was just a lot going on, like just a lot of stuff. So it was just like, okay. Um, so like I had said, like I was always feeling things very intensely, but I didn't know what to do with them besides just
Yeah.
die. Um, so it was like kind of so because of that, like I started hardening myself and just kind of like closing off, like just a little bit. Like it's just like okay, just let things be. Just kind of like close yourself off. Um, so around this time too, like I was noticing differences like in how me and my sisters were being treated. So we would sometimes like go to family functions, and it's always that family member where they ain't seen you in a long time. And my older sister and my mom, like at that time, they looked very identical. So people would always be like, "Oh, your twin, like she looks just like you, but that one don't look like you." And I'm just
Yeah.
like, "What
Oh
difference?"
wow.
Just stuff
Yeah.
like that. Like, and so I started looking at like, okay, well, I guess people are treating us differently. And so the only thing that I equated it to was like my skin tone, or, maybe I'm not pretty, or, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was the only darker brown skinned child like in the house. My other sisters
Mm.
were light skinned. So
Mm.
equated to that being like the issue and the problem. Back then, won't nobody checking for a little brownie.
Yeah.
So it was just like when I say like a lot of internalizing, just a lot of internalizing. I
Mm.
think at that point, that's when I really started having thoughts like something is just wrong with me. Just really starting to like not like myself at all.
Mm.
Um, so I guess I was like around 11, 12, at that point. Um, so I just noticed like the only positivity that I would kind of get from adults or like other people is whenever I talked about my career, wanting to be a doctor or, just wanting to do something. Like people would always get like intrigued by that or something. They'd be like, oh,
Yeah.
that's pretty good and stuff like that. But outside of that, it didn't seem like it was much attention like given to me. Um,
Mm.
and I can even remember like getting into it with my grandma, my mom's mom at one point, because I was just like, everybody's always focused on them. And she would even say things like, it's just not your time yet. It's just not your time. And I'm like, what is that supposed to mean? Like, why does it have to be somebody's time to
Yeah.
show interest?
And
Um,
so.
and I feel like because of that, um, it made it easier for her boyfriend at the time to molest me or abuse me because, eventually he started to show interest and, be nice and just certain things like that. You know, um,
Mm.
so sometimes he would be like real nice and then he would be like real mean. So, we
Mm.
didn't know like how to take him for real, for real. Like sometimes we just didn't like being around him and, sometimes it was kind of okay. Um, but after that divorce, we had started moving a lot too. So we had stayed in one house, and then a little while after that, we had moved to another house, and we had
Mm.
come up with the blue house. And so sometimes my mom would have like a off and on relationship with with the guy. Like we wouldn't
Mm.
see him for a while, and then he would just start coming back around. Um, and it was just very, like I say, confusing and uncomfortable because it's like I still
Yeah.
memory of what he did, and it's like I hated to see him, but it's kind of like you can't show that. And then my mom, she wants to be a little family, like, come on, let's all eat at the dinner table and do this.
Yeah.
We'll sit at the dinner table, and do all this stuff. I can just remember a lot of times we were asking my mom like, why you just can't be by yourself? Like, why you just can't be single and just
Mm.
be us? Because even around that time, like she would act different when she was, in a relationship. Like she would get a little meaner. Like I say, she was not a disciplinarian at all, but she would start to get like a little bit more stricter or just do things that she really wasn't doing. So it was
Mhm.
kind of like, why you acting different? You know, so like I say, it was becoming like apparent that we didn't like this person for real. Like it wasn't like genuine and stuff. And sometimes she would say little things like she would ask us questions like, do y'all like them? Do y'all want to come around? And we would be like, no, And sometimes she would be like, why? And, try to ask questions. It's just like, we just don't like, I can't tell you the real reason I don't like this man, but we just don't like him. And
Right.
she would always ask these questions like that, but it's like, why are you asking us this stuff if you're gonna stay with them? Like, why do you want our thoughts and feelings and opinions if you are just gonna, the situation is not gonna change, you know?
Yeah. Smart.
And yeah, so I think that started to kind of teach me like, you don't matter. Like, what you think doesn't matter, what you feel doesn't matter. Like, it don't matter. Um, so we would go to our grandma's house like for the whole summer at one point. And so we was there. So I can remember the summer before seventh grade. Um, she had came and picked us up, and we loved being with our grandma. We'd be like, "Can we come live with you?" And
Mhm.
she'd be like, "No, like unfortunately y'all can't." But
Yeah.
it was like that relationship. Like we be crying when it's time to go home. Like we just
Yeah. Grandmama house.
yes.
Yeah.
So she picked us up this one summer and she was just like, when she had picked us up, she was already like, we're gonna have a long talk when we get in the car. So we like, what we gonna have a long talk about?
And this
um,
was your mom.
hmm Yeah,
Mhm.
she had picked us up from our grandma's house that summer. It was the summer before seventh grade. And she was just like, she was just like, well, we basically moved in with her boyfriend. The one that
Oh no.
yeah. So we just all just kind of sat in the car, like kind of quiet. Now, my older sister, she's always been outspoken. Like she always gonna say what's on her mind. She don't care. But I just kind of remember having a few words with her, like, why would you do that? Why would you not include us? Just
Mhm.
kind of having like a deeper conversation, like,
Mhm.
why did you make this decision? I can even remember my sister had got like a little piece of paper and had wrote help us on the little paper and held it up on the window, so people could kind of see
I
it.
can see.
Like, uh, but it was just, it was like a part of me was angry because, like I
Of
say, even
course.
though it had been a few years since that first incident, I just
You
still always
still
feel like
did it.
it happened. Yeah, and I was like,
Yeah.
well, what's gonna happen now that we living in the house with them? Like it was
Mhm.
just a lot going on. Um, so when we moved in at first, it was like it was kind of okay. Like I say, he was giving attention, giving compliments. That was very different. Like he was the first person that ever told me like I had a pretty smile.
Mhm.
And it was just like, okay. And it seemed like after he said that, I heard it a lot more. Cause even him,
Mm.
he was like, you should smile more often. Well, it's like, I ain't got nothing to smile about. Like, I
Yeah.
my life at this point, like, the only fun, good time I'm having is with my sisters, like, like whatever. Um, so of course at the time, like I didn't know that that was a form of like grooming. You know, um,
Mhm.
I was getting ready to turn 13 and he had helped because I had asked my mom and him like, can I have a party? I was making a little bit of friends and house parties at that time, they was a little thing. So I was like, can
Right.
I have a party?
That was a thing.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And so they had said yeah. And he was actually like into computers and software stuff. So he helped me like design my little invitations for my party, just kind of things like that. And I
Mhm.
was just like, okay, like he's been a little nice. So had my party, things like that. Like certain things were going okay. And I can remember at this time too, like we were still going to our dad's house. And when we would come back, our older sister would have clothes. And we looking like thinking like, okay. are we getting clothes too? And it's like, no, y'all not getting no clothes. And my mom basically explained it like, well, her dad doesn't get her frequently, so we just took her shopping, to kind of do something with her while y'all were gone. And it's just like, well, we would still like to get clothes too, whether we're here or not.
Yeah.
Um, so I think after that point, like he just started trying to, like I say, just be more inclusive, do more things, like buy us all clothes, and just do certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so our mom, she was like working at nighttime, and at that time, like I really loved to read. Like I felt like that was my other outlet. Like my Kurt Franklin CD was gone, like scratched up. I played that at
Yeah.
home. It worked before. So I had started like reading. We would go to our cousin's house sometime, and she had books over there, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Like they have stories in them. So I
Yeah.
just started like reading a lot, and I can remember like when my mom was at work, he would kind of ask me to come in there and like read my book to him. And so I was just like, okay, like I would sit at the edge of the bed and, just kind of read like a chapter. And, he would always say things like, it's really good that you're reading. He was like, it doesn't matter like what kind of books you read, as long as you read, like it's going to help your brain in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
At that time I was excelling in school, like I say, just always smart. I was in a program like that was prepping you for college. So in seventh grade, I was taking this one class that was supposed to be prepping you for college. We learned about stocks. We're learning about colleges, like we're doing all the things or whatever. Um, and I kind of didn't like it. Like I liked it in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
but at that time, I just wanted to be like with my friends. And so because I was in that class, like I couldn't take like a extracurricular that was like kind of in place of that. So I was just like, I'm getting tired of being smart. Like I'm just trying to be a kid at somewhere in my life.
Yeah.
And I remember telling that teacher, because I was just like, at this point, I was starting to show more aggression and attitude, if you will. But I was
Um,
still like very quiet. So um, I remember telling her, like, I don't want to go to college. Like, y'all can take me out this class. Like, I'm not going to college. I'm not doing that. And I can remember that lady pulling me out of the class to really like go off on me. But it's like that wasn't the first time I heard, because like the whole time I'm in school, I hear all the teachers talking about how smart I am, and I shouldn't be hanging around certain people, and just stuff like that. And it's just like, well, this is the only little piece of outlet that I have. Like, just leave me alone.
yeah.
Um, so it was just so at that time, like school wasn't even fun no more, because at first, like school was an outlet for me, and it's like at that point,
Mm,
it wasn't anymore, because it's like I got all these expectations of me at school. Like I'm just trying to be a kid. Like leave me alone.
yeah.
Um, so one of these nights when he asked me to read to him, like he wanted me to like lay up closer by him or whatever. And he was like, get comfortable and all this stuff like that. And I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't an outspoken child. I was very quiet. And so I just kind of did it because he asked, or, just instructed or whatever. And so I'm just reading the book. I'm already getting nervous because I'm like, why you want me to sit up here by you? But
Mhm.
I'm still like just focused on like reading the book. So during this time, that's when he started touching me again. But this time, like
Mm,
I'm awake and I'm older, and it's like it was just like weird. So I just sat there and read the book, ended the chapter, and then like I was like, okay, I'm ready to go to bed now. And so, he just kind of stopped, and I went to bed, and that was it. Um
mm,
so when I say like it was gaps in between, like the first episode was 10 and now like I'm 13, so it had been a while, but it still had like the same effect or whatever.
effect. Yeah.
Mhm. So during this time too, like when I say he would be mean, like him and my mom would probably get into it, and my older sister would kind of jump in, like trying to defend her, or we would get in trouble for doing something because he was upset by it. Like I can remember times my mom would be like, um, she would be like, "Oh, he felt sad that y'all didn't speak to him, or y'all didn't do certain things," and my
Mm.
just be like, okay, whatever, go back and forth. So it was still like a lot of tension in the house. There would be times where him and my older sister would get into it, and him and my mom would get into it, all these different things. So this one time, him and my mom were kind of arguing, and like I say, when people start to raise their voice a little bit, we kind of get on guard. So we just sitting in a room, just listening, just seeing if anything's gonna happen, and we heard something like start moving, like we heard a little bumping noise and stuff. So we get up, and my older sister busts into the room, and he has my mom pinned like on the bed. And so my older sister started cussing him out, like, "You need to get your hands off my mama," all this stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
At this point, I'm just like, "Oh, we're not gonna do this again." So I'm going downstairs to get a knife. Like, we just gonna nip this in the bud this time. Like, we're not gonna have this type of interactions going on. So my mom was like trying to stop me and all these things. So in the midst of that, he actually called the police. And so when the police came, my mom's telling the situation, what happened, and the police is like just trying to figure everything out, trying to dissolve everything.
Yeah.
And so they're basically like, he says he doesn't want y'all to come back in the house. So we're like, oh, okay, that's fine. So at this time, like my mom was like, okay, so where are we gonna go? Because even during this relationship, like it was so tumultuous, like her relationship with our family members had started like drifting off, like so we really
Mm.
weren't like our family anymore and stuff like that. And everybody lived far away too, so
Yeah.
um, a hotel wasn't an option, I guess, at the time. So I just kind of thought, I was like, well, why don't we go stay with my dad? Now at this time he was married, he had another child, all these different
Mhm.
things like that. And so when I said that to my mom, because at first I was like, well, we can just go stay with, our dad, and, you just go somewhere else. Because that's what she was saying at the time. So I guess
Yeah.
when I kind of called my dad and kind of told him what was going on, he invited all of us to stay. So for about a week, me, my mom, my sisters, we stayed with my dad, his wife, and my other baby sister.
Mhm.
Um, so it was that was a pretty decent week. Like I had my parents together, and I hadn't had that in years. You know what I'm saying? It was like my whole family was kind of together. So he was taking us to school while we were going to staying with him or whatever. So after that point, that's when we actually moved back like on our own. He we didn't move back with him. We just went on our own, and we was glad about that. Like it seemed like everything just kind of calmed down at that point. Um,
Right.
so we was just glad because my mom was calmer. She wasn't saying all the stuff that she would say. Like she would just always be like, "Y'all are just so disrespectful and so disobedient." Like we would hear all the time how bad of kids we were, which was confusing because it's like, what are we doing? You
Right.
know. So things just kind of gotten better at that point when we had
Mhm.
um, lived by ourselves or whatever.
So
Um,
let me chime in a little
mhm,
bit because I'm noticing that even at an early age you were beginning to think things that were and do things that were kind of negative. And so, to speak, you
mhm,
started having the fantasies about what life would look like to kind of tune out your reality of what was going on. And one of the biggest things that I think that the previous generation, one of the biggest mistakes that they did was leaving what was going on inside the household to stay within a household and not get help, because you have now us as millennials and Gen Zs who had been molested, who had experienced things, and we didn't have a voice to say that. And so now we become adults and getting to these relationships and start doing life and can't figure out what's going on with us because of that negative connotation that was put on the Black community as a whole. Now, I get it, you don't want your children to be taken away and things of that sort, but I think that was one of the mistakes that the previous generation did, because now we're trying to navigate through life as millennials, as Gen Zs, and you have a lot of people that have struggled with and have dealt with a lot of trauma, and unfortunately it has literally into narcissism or whatever the case may be, because the brain has literally been rewired for all of the trauma that has been withheld in the body. And you know that, as a psychologist, that's very detrimental to the mental, the physical, the spiritual aspects of things. And so I'm just kind of listening and I'm paying attention that how from a very early age, those seeds were planted in you. And you're not even, I mean, you're a teenager at this point, but you're still young. You haven't even gotten to the 14, 15, you haven't even gotten to high school at this point. And so it's kind of it's kind of like, okay, like, see, this is why it's important for us to be mindful of what we do, what we say, and how we treat our children, or if not, we're going to have another generation traumatic. I mean, children growing up with trauma already. So yeah. So I didn't mean to cut you off. I just kind of wanted to point that out, because that's very serious to note, even as parents or as mothers, to be mindful of those things. And thank you for sharing. I still want you to share more, but you didn't have to share those things. So thank you for your vulnerability. I appreciate that. I know it wasn't easy thing to do, but yes, I just kind of wanted to point that out.
Yes, and that is exactly, what this part of the story is. Like you say, be mindful of how you treat your children. Like that is what, the childhood stuff is. Because like you say, that's just becoming 13. That's not even the rest of, my childhood, which actually got worse. Like it got worse, so it was just like, I do want people to be mindful of how you treat children, not even just your own, but even the people who would compliment my sisters or say something to her and not say nothing to me, or, just even say rude things. And it's just like, why do you think that's okay? Because you don't know how children are internalizing things, or, what's that creating in them. But like you say, the point of this too is all those thoughts that I had, like they didn't just go away, at 18, like they were still there at 30 years old. So it's it's really sad. It is. Really
That
sad.
part. And I think that one of the pivotal moments, and I'm going to share my story as well, but one of the pivotal moments for me, I knew I had issues. Like, even prior to marriage, like, I knew I had issues. I had this mindset of, that's just how I am type personality, and a lot of people have that. Well, that's just who I am, that's just how I am, not knowing that is your trauma that is spewing out of your body. That's not really how you are. Like, I used to think I was not this sensitive person. I'm like hardcore. I am very sensitive. Like, and I will cry at the drop of anything. I will cry at a movie. And, I didn't realize that I was harboring and holding all of that in until after I started, because I started really intensifying. I had been in therapy prior to marriage, but I wasn't taking it serious. Like, it was like, okay, well, I'm just going to vent, and whatever the ladies say, I'm going to just do whatever, It was more of a venting session, but I really intensified it when going through the things that I went through in my previous marriage. And I started realizing, like, like, a lot of this spewed from your childhood. And this really is not how you are. Your inner child is really acting out in such a way. It's your trauma coming out, because it's really is not how you are. And I think that was a very pivotal moment for me, and was like, if I don't deal with this, I'm going to raise up my children under my traumatic inner child. which
Mhm.
can then be detrimental to how they grow up because of
Right.
how I am parenting that. And so even in that, I think it's important for us to even like take a step back and to be like, well, why am I like this? Why do I say the things that I do? Why do I act the way that I do? Because is this really me? Is this really who God has called me to be? Or is this my inner child? Is this the trauma that is spewing for me? Because it really did not hit me, and I'm 32. And it did not hit me until I was in my 30s, and I was like, my God, like, had
Right.
I known this in my early 20s, I could have avoided a whole bunch of stuff relationally, a whole bunch of more trauma, because the trauma didn't stop as a child.
Right.
I was still dealing with traumatic stuff as an adult. And even in my previous marriage, it was like, yo, okay, something has to stop, because this isn't normal. This isn't normal. Nobody should have to be experiencing these things and
Mhm.
be put in these situations for that. So yeah, that was a pivotal moment for me.
Yeah, most definitely. And I definitely agree with everything you just said. Um,
Yeah.
like you say, I'm very sensitive too, but it's like I knew I was sensitive, but after things started happening, like I had to make myself hard
Yeah, that's right.
because it was just too intense, for me, to be feeling all those things at that young age. So, like you say, it did get to the point like when I became nonchalant, it was bad. Like everybody, when
Yeah.
I say I heard that, like I think I just worked on that, a couple years ago. Like it was
Hmm.
bad. Like people would be like, you act like you don't care. And at one
Hmm.
point I would say like I don't. Like, you know, I really don't. But, even underneath all of that, like I would care, but it was just like
Yeah, you don't know.
I'm not expressing no weakness.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna do that because, no one else is gonna hurt me. So most definitely, I definitely understand that.
Yeah, yeah. So, all right, guys. So, this is a series. So, we're going to cut this one off right here and make sure you check out part 2.